honored and humbled in the presence of these amazing beings behind me, and certainly all of you. So thank you to Shivananda for having me and letting me speak about my passion, Ayurveda. I've been involved in Ayurveda for over 25 years now, but I came to it kind of late in life. You know, I was about 40 years old when it discovered me, and it knocked me off my feet. You know, I was not a yogi. I wasn't practicing yoga. I was a meditator. I had done transcendental meditation in college. I think everybody did in the 70s. And that was my only entree into this world. But life kind of took over, and I found myself in not such a great place. You know, I was a mother of three, a wife, was running 3 businesses, and my life was crazy. We call it vata derangement now that I know what that means. I was living a crazy, crazy life, and I wasn't doing well. My being wasn't happy, my body wasn't happy, my relationships weren't all particularly happy either. And a good friend of mine reminded me that maybe I should start meditating again, you know, because I had dropped that, you know, as well as life took over. And so I did. I started up my meditation, and along the way, when I got reconnected with these people, someone introduced me to, of all books, Deepak Chopra's Perfect Health. And it just blew me away. You know, it just hit me in the heart. I just knew what it meant. And it was one of those things that I felt in every cell of my body. You know, it was wisdom that we all know. This is universal wisdom, you know, and it's something that hit me hard. And I knew I had to study it, but there really weren't too many schools around at the time. This was in the mid-90s. But I held out for a little bit, and then I couldn't wait any longer, and suddenly it was sort of a miraculous moment. I was on the street shopping, and a newspaper fell in front of me on the ground, and there was a big advertisement for a school of Ayurveda that happened to be in Boston, I'm from Massachusetts. And I said, wow, you know, I guess I better check this out. I was the New England Institute of Ayurvedic Medicine, and Dr. David Frawley was very involved. Some of you may know that name. And some wonderful teachers from India came and somehow made it work. I had 3 small children at the time, and it was hard for me to go away and study, you know, but my husband and family, you know, helped to make it happen for me. And I just never turned back. That was the beginning of my long journey, and met just amazing people along the way. But what it did was it turned my life around. And it was my entree into, you know, a spiritual life as well. It wasn't something I expected, and it just kind of came along part and parcel with, you know, with all of it. And I had serious health issues going on at the time, but as I began to practice the most simple things started to shift. And as they shifted, my mind shifted, and my outlook shifted, and everything about my life started to sort of fall back together again, like it had never been. And I didn't even know how bad it was until suddenly, you know, it wasn't anymore. And so I was fortunate enough to be invited to India in 2000, to Rishikesh, of all places. That was my first entree to India. And 2000's a long time ago. It was a really different place back then. I mean, barely any internet going on. And it was, nobody had cell phones, and it was kind of crazy. And I had never really been out of the country before. So and that trip also was kind of a miracle. We couldn't afford it. It was a big leap. Dr. Frawley had invited me, and I said, well, I can't afford to go. And suddenly, money just appeared, and, things started coming together, and leaving my family for a month was not an easy thing to do, mother of 3 little kids and a business and all of it. But my husband and family, again, made it happen. So I'm so blessed by all the connections and people that have been in my life and the path that came my way, and I'm so grateful that I was able to grab it and make it, real in my life. And that visit to Rishikesh was mind-blowing. They had invited some of the most important sages of Ayurveda from all around the country to come and speak and teach to this. It was a group of about 30 people from all over the world, just, students of Ayurveda. And these gurus of Ayurveda didn't speak English, so we had an interpreter. And I had studied just a little Sanskrit just before, the year before I got there. And I was able to read enough signs. I was really proud of myself. By the time I got to India, I could actually read some things. And what was sort of freaky was I could start to understand them, because they spoke mostly Sanskrit, because it's all shlokas, right? The language of Sanskrit. And they were a little reticent to begin with, because Ayurveda's been sheltered for very good reason for a long time, because people came and plundered. They burned down libraries, they took books, it was dangerous at a time in India to be an Ayurvedic practitioner or to have that knowledge. So I believe, this is my belief, and from my teachers that I've studied with, that many of them protected it so closely that they didn't want it to leave their shores. They were afraid that we would not hold it in the same way that they did and honor it, and I understand that. So these teachers came, and they're sitting up on the stage, and there's this eager group of 30 people or more, mostly white women, a few men, and so it was a strange combination, and these were all but one of the teachers were men. And it was a little awkward at first. They weren't sure what to think. They weren't sure how much to give. You could kind of feel the hesitancy, in them. And as soon as they kind of connected with us, and we were there with such love and admiration for the science of Ayurveda and for them, that our hearts just exploded. Everybody, it became just this amazing sort of love environment, and the knowledge just started pouring out of them. And it was so easy to receive, even though we didn't know the language and we had to wait for the interpreters and all. But it went on for a month, from morning till night. And they took us on, they did a homa that hadn't been done in Rishikesh by a family that used to hold the homa as part of their tradition in this central home in the central part of Rishikesh. But when the British came, the people that ran homas, that took care of the village, were no longer supported by the government or the village, because the British changed all of that. So suddenly, the pujaris and all these, people running these events and these daily practices couldn't do it anymore. They had to go get jobs. So this particular homa hadn't been done. So the family that had held this for years gathered up about 20 swamis, In the traditional home where there's the inner sanctum of it is open to the air, and so the fire could be burned, and the women were bringing food from the kitchen nonstop, trays and trays and trays of food to offer to the home. And before you knew it, there was a pile like this in the middle of the room, and they were chanting so fast and so vigorously that we became dizzy. The energy was palpable. It was just amazing, and they did that all for us. It was just so special. So by the time that we left India, this group of people, and there are several of us from the United States, we were felt as though, we had side conversations with the teachers, and expressed our hesitancy to go out in the world with special knowledge, with the minimal amount of study that many of us had done at that point. We were very humbled by the whole thing. And it was just amazing how they just sort of tapped us and said, no, you must go and share whatever you can. You need to bring Ayurveda, to the world. We're ready to share it. And it was amazing. It was amazing. You felt like you were tapped, and you had this series of gurus behind you to prop you up and to tell, to give you the courage to go forward and to share. And so we did, and I came home. I didn't know what to do with it all. It was a little overpowering. I live in a little town in the hills of the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and nobody had ever heard of Ayurveda before, and it was not welcomed with open arms, let's just say. Along the way, I live in the county that Kripalu Yoga Center is in. They're about an hour from my home, and my husband convinced them to see if they would like any Ayurveda going on there. And at the time, that ashram had gone through a lot of drama, and I didn't know much about them. I hadn't been involved or anything. You just heard the stories, and so I went, and they immediately asked me to stay and start doing Ayurvedic consultations there, which was something I was starting to get comfortable with doing. And so we started doing that, and I had learned the Ayurvedic treatments in my studies, my post-studies. I studied actually with another teacher of mine, John Duyard, who I believe is going to be visiting here. He was one of my first pulse teachers in my school. And he also was the teacher that brought all the Ayurvedic treatments to the Maharishis groups around the country back in the early 90s. And he taught for one time a whole group of us the Ayurvedic treatments. So I fell in love with those, and I did that. And Kripalu had this amazing healing arts department with like 30 rooms and 60 therapists for them to start offering, Ayurvedic treatments. So we started doing that. I started training. Other people wanted to come. We got Vaidya that would come and do Panchakarma with us there. And it started to take root at Kripalu. And, like many of you in the world of, how many of you have heard of Ayurveda before, by the way? So that's just about every arm in the room. And this is the of, because you guys at least know how to pronounce it. And you've maybe you're practicing some, certainly have heard some, started studying. But so many people coming to a place like Kripalu, it's more of a retreat center, are just, everyday people wanting to explore a little bit. And it's a really safe and beautiful place to do that. So we were given the opportunity to start to share Ayurveda, and people kind of started getting lit up. And so Kripalu said, well, Hilary, why don't you start a school? It's like, what? I am not an educator. I don't know anything about that. You guys do a really good job with your yoga teacher trainings, and I can probably introduce you to some people and maybe get some teachers, from my old school and people that I had come to know. So long story short, I ended up putting this school together and running it. Goes to show you that if you have passion and you've got some good, juju behind, things can happen. And we opened of attendees in 2005, and it's been going on, since. And I had the great privilege of working there for like 13 years, and not just helping to start the school and to share that, but also to teach everyday people, just, the people that come for their R&R programs. By an afternoon's talk and just being able to understand a little bit more about themselves and how do I fit into this world, and that there are things that you can do that'll make you feel better, and there's lots of things that you'll do that won't make you feel very good, but you never knew it before, until you have a roadmap or sort of a blueprint. It's kind of hard to figure out what's best for you. Certainly, our society and world never taught us that. The Vedas do, and they always have, and they've been such a guide for thousands of years. And it really was lost and certainly not spread far enough. So it was really a privilege to be able to see people light up and to watch the journey start, for people to begin to live a healthy, whole, and more of a happy life. So I'm so happy to continue to share. I want to tell you a little bit about sort of the origins and the history of Ayurveda. I've alluded to it a little bit, but it came from God. And it was given to humanity. And they were great seers at the time that were able to cognize this knowledge and then begin to disseminate it through the language of Sanskrit. And it was oral tradition for a few thousand years. It wasn't written down. It was handed down through families. Families memorized parts of all of this knowledge, and they were the knowledge holders. And they did this because there were so many conquerors that had come through the centuries and years and destroyed libraries and knowledge and books. And if they didn't have this way of keeping the knowledge, so much of it would be lost. So it's amazing. And there's still some knowledge holders. It's not like it used to be. About 2,500 years ago, it was written down by some sages, Charaka, Sashruta, into actual books. Well, they were reeds at the time, and handed down through shloka, through this beautiful poetry, really, that it's easy to memorize, and that's the beauty of Sanskrit. Sanskrit itself is a healing language. Just chanting the alphabet, energizes and balances the body and the mind, and never mind putting it together in these beautiful phrases with intention and all the vibration that goes with them. So I was blown away by all my teachers who could just recite every piece of the book, from beginning to end, like shloka after shloka. And I'm also amazed with all of you and all your beautiful chants and how wonderful and ingrained it can become when it's done properly. And the language of Sanskrit does that to us. So So it was handed down, and then schools, for many years, it was a guru shishya model where it was you lived with your guru, you studied with your guru, and it was handed down, and often through the family. I don't know exactly when the schools began to start to appear, but then colleges began to appear, and the government of India supported them. It was the medicine of India, for thousands of years, really, until the British came, unfortunately. And they diminished the worth of yoga, the Vedas, Ayurveda, and replaced it with Western allopathic model. And the government stopped funding and supporting the educational institutions. So they struggled, many disappeared, some held it together, and so there were fewer and fewer of these institutions. And also, people got polluted in their minds around the beauty and the importance of the Vedas and of the Vedic culture and the Vedic system and yoga and Ayurveda. So the young people started going to study more allopathic medicine. And even those that studied Ayurveda, and this is still going on today, unfortunately, when the British left, the Ayurvedic colleges came back online, but they were changed. They were not so pure. There are still some that are very pure, but many of them were intermingled with Western medicine. So when you graduated from College of Ayurveda in India, you could also practice aspects of Western medicine. And so the Western medical schools were very difficult for students to get into, but the Ayurvedic schools were much easier. So many, many, many young people joined Ayurvedic colleges, not because they loved Ayurveda, which is unfortunate, not because they were drawn specifically to that, but that they could get a job as a doctor, which is a big deal in India. You're a doctor, or you're an engineer, or you really, don't make it according to the families. That's their goal, is to get a doctor or an engineer out of their family. And so it's, so the colleges were, kind of diminished a bit. And what's been interesting, much like yoga, when yoga came to the West, it became reinvigorated in India as well, because the West thinks it's great. We should honor our own systems. So there was a resurgence of yoga. And yoga, of course, came to the United States and to the West before Ayurveda. So we're so grateful that, the great gurus came here to at least open a doorway that the rest of us could walk through. So we were grateful for that. And it wasn't really until, I think, the early 80s that a few Ayurvedic gurus started coming here. Dr. Lad, for one, Sunil Joshi. There were a handful, just a few, that would come mainly to the centers out in California. It was a little more open, and that's when, things started opening up for Ayurveda in the West. And as more and more people became interested, the switch in India went off too, and people went, oh, Ayurveda, it's our science. We want to keep it. We want to revive it again. So there's been a resurgence, and certainly with Modi in office, who's a great supporter of yoga and Ayurveda, there's been even more in the last, few years. So it's been quite a journey. And now Ayurveda is all over the world. It's in South America, it's in Australia, it's in Europe, it's probably not in China yet, but it's happening everywhere. So it's a very exciting time, but it's still a challenging time, for Ayurveda to take hold. And those of us that practice, and those of us that have taught, and those of us that have helped to build an industry of Ayurveda, it's still struggling. And because Western medicine is resistant, and we come up against a lot of barriers and things that make it hard for people to build a strong practice. But we know how important it is, and we're still being asked and called by people who want a more holistic, approach to health and wellness in their life. And Western medicine just doesn't do it, Ayurveda is the first personalized medicine. All these words are now coming up, patient-centered, holistic, all of these things, all the things that Ayurveda has been from the very beginning. And it's a science that's based on natural laws and rhythms of nature, and based on understanding that we're just a microcosm of the macrocosm. Everything that is in us is out there, and this interface with the natural world is what we need to understand and live with and dance with. And Ayurveda understands your body, a mind, and a soul. There's no other medicine out there that speaks of that. None. It's considered the oldest continuously practiced form of medicine in the world. And most other systems have some roots in Ayurveda. Now, probably Chinese medicine might argue with me about that, but there is some data out there around that. And they're very similar systems in many ways. But, Ayurveda is just, it's exquisite, and it's what I loved about it. And I had stepped into it, as I said, not coming from this world of, spiritual life or understanding India or the Vedas or any of that. I walked into it as a mom of 3 kids, middle-aged. My background was in agriculture. I was, none of it was connected. And it just took me over. And it did because it made so much sense. To me, Ayurveda is practical. Now, you can get as complicated as you want with it. You can study it forever, and there's so many layers to it, just like yoga. And you can make it very complicated, but it isn't. It's very simple, and that's what struck me as a kind of somebody with a science sort of mind and view of the world from my education. Things needed to make sense, and to me it did, and the practical things that I did worked, and they were easy, and they weren't complicated, and you didn't need to do tons of things. And I've studied for years, and it always comes back to the most simple things. If you conquer some of the most simple things, you'll be fine. I mean, there's the Dravya Guna, the herbal component of Ayurveda, is also exquisite because it matches energy with energy. You get the right herb for the right thing, for the right amount of time, and it works. It's magic. So the medicine itself is amazing. The treatments are amazing. The work with prana, and cultivating prana and understanding prana and how it moves and what it does and how you can invite good prana in, through the substances you take in and the environment you take in and all of that, and how it shapes, our being, and how we cultivate this tejas, this fire, this essence in us to, enliven everything, and how we build this ojas, this juice that keeps us going, our immunity, our strength and vigor. All these things are very subtle energies that we're talking about that are just our essences in Ayurveda, that when you understand them and when you begin to work with them, you actually feel them. It wasn't until I actually personally did Panchakarma that I got the doshas. that I got what this was about, these energies that are part of our being, that make up our constitution. I didn't quite get it. They're a little amorphous to begin with. When you start studying, it's a lot of philosophy and it's a lot of like subtle things. And unless you start feeling it, you don't get it. So going through a treatment or an experience where you can feel the shift in your body and your mind, the mind is such a crucial piece of all of it. And I didn't know that for many years either. I was this hardcore materialist working with this body. It's like, I'll conquer this body and then we'll go to the next thing. Well, it doesn't work that way. It does a little. If you can get your body in better shape and you're, eating better foods and you're feeling more situated in your body, obviously the mind begins to follow along. They're connected, the body, the mind, and the soul. You do good things, the others are going to go along. So just learning what is best for you, and also learning that one thing doesn't work for everybody, and that's sort of a Western model, like take this and take this diet and it's good for everybody. We know that that's not true. Herb or this food, it has to be very tuned for you. And so you're made up of these 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And you all have slightly different proportions of these things. That will shape even your thoughts, even though those are more controlled by the trigunas, but there's this connection between the body and the doshas and the gunas that is very subtle too. So we know that certain people and certain constitutions will have particular mindsets often that you can almost predict. So we look at that, and then, but everyone is unique. So the discovery of figuring out who you are and how you fit is something that I can guide you, or a practitioner can guide you, but you have to do the work. And that's the hard thing about Ayurveda. It's like, it's amazing, but you have to do the work. It's not a pill. We're not gonna, tap you and get you better, or do one thing and get you better. It's you learning about you and what makes you tick and what throws you off and what enlivens you and what balances you. When I first did, how many of you have done a questionnaire? One of those Ayurvedic questions. I love you guys. One of those Ayurvedic questionnaires, pretty confusing, huh? You come out and you go, I'm messed up everywhere. I don't know, I'm everything. So it takes a little time. And when I first did the questionnaires are designed, and we're going to do this in the workshop tomorrow, are designed for you to really sit and think about who you are through your life, like where you started as a child, what your energies were like, not necessarily where you are right now, which could be intermingled with a lot of other stuff that has thrown you off, and you've lived in this thrown off place for a while, so suddenly you feel like that's who you are. And that's what happened to me. My constitution is Pitta Kapha. I didn't know that till I started all this. When I did the questionnaire, it came out all Vata. But it was my lifestyle. It was everything that was going on in my life at the time. It was crazy, all over the place, and multitasking, and all the Vata imbalances that you could imagine. And it wasn't my constitution, and still isn't. But it was the lifestyle I led that threw everything off. So I thought that's who I was. But deep down inside, I knew it wasn't right. I didn't feel myself. You know what I mean by that? How you wake up sometimes, I'm not feeling myself today. And you touched upon it last night, this self that we know it's just there, and we know it, and we know it when it's not right. So that time when I discovered Ayurveda, I was not myself, and everything felt wrong. I just didn't, it didn't feel like I was fitting. And then I got to know more about myself, not fully, but this constitution that I live in and the tendencies of it and what it meant. And I went, yeah, that feels right. That's who I feel like I am. That's who I felt like I was when I was a child. So when you do these sorts of questionnaires, you have to sort of dig deep. And often people say you should do it with a relative or somebody who knows you and will keep you honest, because you can fill that out and you can look pretty good on paper, if you want to, but it's not necessarily correct or who you are. So you want to be honest with the answers. And every constitution is perfect and lovely and great. And every constitution has its challenges. So there are little challenges and weaknesses that we all struggle with a little bit just based on what we were given, at birth, which is a configuration of our genetics, our mother's mood when we were in her womb, the season we were born in, the culture we were born in. All of these things are factors in shaping, who you are and the constitution that you come into the world with. So, everybody has, a unique sort of place in all of it. So I invite you to sort of begin to explore, this piece, the way that it unwraps and uncovers, these things for you. And it'll make sense. It's not something you have to try to believe. You'll just believe it. You'll know it to be true because it feels right, as you begin to, look at it and play with it and uncover it. And then yoga and Ayurveda are what we consider sister sciences. They grew up with the same philosophies and in the Vedas, and they're rooted in, truth and happiness and love and all of that. And so it's, part of the path that many of you have chosen, to explore this piece is just going to be augment, your lives even more, help you find that balance that, we're all seeking. And we go out of balance. Life happens, And the more we learn about ourselves, and the more we learn about, negotiating the world that we're in, the easier it is to bring ourselves back into balance. Things happen, all kinds of things happen. And when you start to feel, because you're in tune, more in tune with your own body and your own constitution, you'll begin to know when something's off. And you begin to turn it around. And it usually just takes a few days. If you're tuned in and you pay attention, if you make it part of your daily practice to sort of check in, which I think, is part of your yoga that you do, which I've enjoyed the last few days, is that check in with the body. Stop and listen and then ask your body, what do I need today? What's going on? Why am I feeling this way? And then you go back, yesterday I did this thing and that wasn't very good for me, or I ate that thing, or I stayed up late, or whatever it is. But so many of us, Westerners anyway, and I'm a big one, just go through life pretty unconscious. You're just rolling along, you keep doing things. And society tells you all these things are good to do, stay up late and eat this food. And the advertisement says everybody should have that, so I'm going to have that. And, all of a sudden you're polluted with all kinds of things. And it's a very confusing, mix of things that happen to the body, and it's hard for the body to figure it out. So you just step back and simplify. When it gets complicated, simplify. Eat very simply, go to bed early, do the simple things that you all practice here to start to unwind and bring these things back in. And usually you can catch things before they get out of control. But things happen, and diseases do happen, and Ayurveda is a wonderful tool for many things and many, complicated things as well. So it's just an amazing science, and it's practiced as a full medical science in India, even surgery. The first surgeon was Sushruta, the Ayurvedic surgeon in the world. So the roots are deep, and people are taken care of from pregnancy through death in Ayurveda. There's something for everyone, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful system, of caring for, the mother and the father to produce the good progeny and healthy children, and then the postpartum, where it's a sacred 40-day window that women and children are nurtured, with love and care and the right foods and the right environment to build strong, healthy, happy beings. And that was part of Vedic culture. It was expected that we would do that, and that we'd care for ourselves and our families in that way, and build a society that was, robust and strong and healthy and loving and balanced, So the world needs this more than ever. So we need more of you to study Ayurveda and to bring it to the world. And I love how yoga schools and yoga centers are now introducing more Ayurveda to their students, and just in the simplest ways. How many of you are already doing that in your world, in your classes? Just the simplest ways that you can introduce it, and you'll hit a spark in someone, and then it's an easy journey. There's so many wonderful books out there that are very easily accessible, tons of them in the bookshop here that are easy to pick up and read and take in. There are now a lot of schools out there that are really, we've worked from the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, platform in helping to create an accreditation commission to hold some strong schools in place and begin to give them great support. And we've built certification for the professionals so that our goal is to be licensed in the United States. But there's so many things you have to do to get there. And you have to, build a strong, group of people, show that the schools are viable and strong, and have people that are certified and working out there before you can approach the state legislatures to become licensed. So we're kind of following on the wings of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and it took them several years to get there, but our hope is that we will. And that we will stand side by side with other practices of medicine in the country and in the world. So that's the goal. I'm out of time. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I don't want to go over, your evening time. So we're going to continue this in our workshops this week, tomorrow and on Sunday. So if anybody wants to join us, we're going to get into more personal, identification and who you are and what you can do, and troubleshooting, and help you walk away with a few tools that are going to be unique and helpful for you. So, okay. Oh, we have, I guess, a question. Unless you were stretching over here. It's been a long day.
No, thank you for being here tonight and sharing your story. It's quite inspiring. I guess I have many questions, but forgive me if I get ahead of myself, but you said you will delve into more details as far as the ingredients you look for and the components when you do a diagnosis, and how the length of the period for you to determine the case and the symptoms.
Yeah, I can certainly talk about some of that in our workshops this week for sure.
Workshops, are they?
Tomorrow at noon, right?
We can do that.
Oh, you can't. Oh, you're in the training course.
Yes.
Well, you're going to have to reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I hopefully we can just leave my email. I'll write it up here.
Yeah, that would be
I'm
amazing.
super happy
That would be
to
lovely.
support anyone in any part of their journey and all of this. It's been my dharma actually for many years, is being, a person to help guide people to learning more more
Yes,
about themselves.
I'm actually very curious.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll put my email up here
Thanks
on
a
my
lot.
website.
I was just wondering if there's a source of list of schools in,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
States and maybe in the world.
Yeah, so it's you can Google it, but this is the name of the Ayurvedic Accreditation Commission. And they have all the schools that are currently in the process of becoming accredited. They're mostly candidate schools at this point, which means that they've jumped through the hoops to be schools that are strong and have a good foundation and have really built some good models out there. It wasn't like that a few years ago because nobody was really watching what the schools were doing, and there's a lot of fly-by-night kind of online programs that offer something for 100 hours or whatever. They have a place, and it's sometimes a good place to start, but it's not a place where you're going to gain deep knowledge if you are interested in going into the field.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
so this is a good place to start, and I can also, talk to people too.
Would you know any other than Maharishi School, that credited school? There's more than one now?
The Maharishi International University is one of the major accredited schools that's offering a bachelor and a master's degree. Mount Madonna Institute in California has a master's degree program as well. And right now, I think those are the only two accredited schools that are out there, accredited in the Western accrediting model of higher education. This is accrediting of the Ayurvedic schools that are offering certificates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I couldn't find anything, so it's difficult to
Yeah.
navigate. Thank you so much.
Yeah. This is my email. I'm happy to, and I'm here for a few days, so if you see me walking around or hanging out, I'm happy to sit and talk with people and guide as well, so. Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to thank again very much Hilary Garivaltis for this beautiful presentation and for sharing her story. Let's give her another very big hand.